From the early Grand Princes of Moscow to Ivan the Terrible and the infamous tsars of the Russian Empire such as Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, the Russian monarchy has a long and rich history spanning over 1,000 years. They built grand palaces in which they threw lavish parties lasting early into the morning. Meanwhile, the average Russian was living in ancient dwellings, and their town or village industry was generations behind the rest of Europe. This led to a building resentment towards the inaction of the tsar and the worsening wealth inequality they were blaming on him. This would first come to a head during the 1905 revolution and then during the February Revolution in 1917, which ultimately ended with the demise of the tsar and his family. Welcome back to Compelling History. Today we begin our series examining the downfall of four once all-powerful royal families, starting with the Russian tsars, who ruled over Eastern Europe for centuries before meeting a brutal end at the hands of their own people. Before we head back to Tsarist Russia, make sure you've liked and subscribed to help the channel grow, and if you have any topic ideas for future series, let us know down in the comments below. Part 1. A Brief History. The origins of the Russian monarchy can be traced back to the emergence of the Rurikids, a dynasty founded by Rurik, a Varangian chieftain, in 862. Rurik's leadership laid the foundation for what would become Kievan Ruses, a federation of East Slavic tribes under a centralized authority. The Rurikid dynasty, characterized by a succession of princely rulers, witnessed both internal consolidation and external expansion, shaping the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe. As the Rurikid era unfolded, Kievan Ruses experienced periods of prosperity and cultural flourishing, marked by the spread of Christianity under Prince Vladimir the Great in 988. However, internal strife and external pressures from Mongol invasions in the 13th century ushered in a period of decline for the Rurikid domains, eventually leading to fragmentation and the emergence of independent principalities. The fragmentation of Kievan Ruses set the stage for what is often referred to as the Time of Troubles, the tumultuous period of political instability and social unrest that gripped Russia from 1598 to 1613. With the demise of the Rurikid dynasty in 1598, Russia plunged into chaos, characterized by dynastic disputes, peasant uprisings, and foreign interventions. The vacuum of power paved the way for pretenders to the throne, including false Dmitry and other claimants, plunging the realm into further disarray. Amidst this turmoil, the fate of the Russian state hung in the balance until the emergence of Mikhail Romanov in 1613. Elected by the Zemsky Sobor, Assembly of the Land, Mikhail Romanov ascended to the throne, inaugurating a new era in Russian history and establishing the House of Romanov. The transfer of power to the Romanovs heralded a period of stabilization and centralization under Tsar Mikhail and his successors. The Romanov dynasty, spanning over 3 centuries, witnessed Russia's transformation from a medieval principality into a formidable empire, expanding its territories across Eurasia and asserting its influence on the world stage. The reign of Peter the Great marked a watershed moment in Russian history as he embarked on ambitious reforms aimed at modernizing the state and integrating Russia into the European community. Peter's sweeping changes, encompassing military, administrative, and cultural spheres, laid the foundation for Russia's emergence as a great power in the 18th century. However, the zenith of Romanov rule was accompanied by internal contradictions and external challenges. The pressures of modernization clashed with entrenched traditions, leading to periodic unrest and rebellions, such as the Pugachev Rebellion in the 18th century and the Decembrist uprising in the 19th century. Moreover, Russia's expansionist ambitions brought it into conflict with neighboring powers, culminating during the Napoleonic Wars and the Crimean War, which exposed the vulnerabilities of the Russian Empire and fueled discontent among its subjects. By the dawn of the 20th century, the Russian monarchy stood at a crossroads, grappling with the forces of revolution, industrialization, and social change. The strains of World War I and the ineptitude of Tsar Nicholas II exacerbated these underlying tensions, ultimately resulting in the collapse of the Romanov dynasty and the onset of the Russian Revolution in 1917. Part 2. House of Romanov. The story of the Romanovs begins in the early 17th century amidst the chaos and uncertainty that followed the demise of the Rurik dynasty. In 1613, the Russian nobility, seeking stability and legitimacy, turned to a modest nobleman named Michael Romanov to ascend the throne as Tsar. Thus commenced the reign of the Romanov dynasty, which would endure for over 3 centuries. Under the early Romanov tsars, Russia began its transformation from a fragmented and backward state into a formidable European power. The likes of Alexis I and Peter the Great ushered in an era of territorial expansion, modernization, and cultural renaissance, laying the foundations for the mighty Russian Empire. At the dawn of the 18th century, Peter the Great emerged as a colossus of statecraft and reform. His visionary leadership propelled Russia into the ranks of Europe's great powers, steering the nation towards westernization and enlightenment. Through his efforts, Peter centralized authority, modernized the military, and fostered economic growth, cementing Russia's status as a force to be reckoned with on the world stage. As the Russian Empire flourished, so too did the prominence of the Romanov dynasty. Catherine the Great, a formidable monarch in her own right, oversaw an era of enlightenment and cultural blossoming. Her patronage of the arts, expansive territorial acquisitions, and astute diplomacy elevated Russia's stature among the great powers of Europe. As the family approached the dawn of the 20th century, their story would come to its final chapter with the reign of its last figurehead, Tsar Nicholas II. Despite his earnest intentions, Nicholas found himself ill-equipped to navigate the treacherous currents of modernity and political unrest that was engulfing Russia. Part 3. Fall of the Tsar. The reign of Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, was fraught with controversies that significantly contributed to the downfall of the Russian monarchy. Despite inheriting a vast empire, Nicholas faced mounting challenges that strained the fabric of Russian society. His autocratic rule and resistance to reform alienated various segments of the population, leading to widespread discontent and unrest. Nicholas's reactionary policies and reliance on a corrupt bureaucracy exacerbated social and economic grievances, particularly among the peasantry and the burgeoning industrial proletariat. The harsh living conditions, coupled with the suppression of dissent, fueled revolutionary fervor and gave rise to radical movements advocating for political change. One of the most significant events during Nicholas II's reign was the massacre that occurred on January 22, 1905, known as Bloody Sunday. Thousands of unarmed protesters, led by Father Georgy Gapon, marched to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg to present a petition to the Tsar requesting better working conditions and political reforms. However, they were met with violent repression from the Imperial Guard, resulting in hundreds of deaths and injuries. This brutal crackdown ignited widespread strikes, protests, and uprisings across the empire, marking the beginning of the 1905 revolution. Furthermore, Nicholas's decision to involve Russia in the Russo-Japanese War over territorial disputes in East Asia proved to be a strategic and diplomatic blunder. The humiliating defeat suffered by the Russian Empire at the hands of Japan in 1905 shattered the myth of Russian military invincibility and further eroded public confidence in the Tsarist regime. The war exacerbated social and economic tensions, contributing to the revolutionary fervor that swept through Russia in the aftermath of Bloody Sunday. In response to the mounting pressure of the 1905 revolution, Nicholas II was forced to issue the October Manifesto, promising civil liberties, including the establishment of a legislative assembly, the Duma, and the guarantee of basic freedoms such as freedom of speech and assembly. However, these concessions were largely superficial, and Nicholas retained significant autocratic power. The subsequent convocation of the First Duma in 1906 highlighted the inherent tensions between the monarchy and the emerging parliamentary system, ultimately leading to its dissolution by Nicholas II after just 3 months. The decision to involve Russia in World War I had far-reaching consequences for Nicholas II and his regime. Initially greeted with patriotic fervor, the war quickly devolved into a brutal and protracted conflict, exacting a heavy toll on the Russian military and civilian populations. The Tsar's mismanagement of the war effort, coupled with supply shortages, logistical failures, and mounting casualties, fueled resentment and discontent among the populace. The strain of the war exacerbated existing social and economic grievances, hastening the collapse of the Tsarist regime. The culmination of years of discontent and frustration came to a head with the outbreak of the February Revolution in 1917. Widespread strikes, food shortages, and military mutinies erupted in Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg, leading to the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II on March 15, 1917. The collapse of the Romanov dynasty paved the way for the establishment of a provisional government, marking the end of centuries of autocratic rule in Russia and the beginning of a tumultuous period of revolutionary upheaval. The events of February 1917 shattered the illusion of czarist invincibility and signaled the end of centuries of Romanov rule. With the abdication of Nicholas II, power passed into the hands of a provisional government composed of liberal and moderate socialist elements, marking the onset of a tumultuous period of dual power and political uncertainty. For the Romanov family, the February Revolution spelled the beginning of a tragic odyssey that would ultimately end in bloodshed and exile. Placed under house arrest at the Alexander Palace in Tsarskoye Selo, the Tsar and his family awaited an uncertain fate, unaware of the cataclysmic events that lay ahead. The demise of the Romanov family was sealed with the Bolshevik seizure of power in October 1917. Led by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Party, the October Revolution heralded the establishment of a communist regime, signaling the death knell for the Russian monarchy. In the early hours of July 17, 1918, the Romanovs met their tragic end at the hands of Bolshevik executioners in the basement of the Ipatiev house in Ekaterinburg. Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, and their 5 children were brutally murdered, bringing an ignominious close to the Romanov dynasty and the era of czarist rule in Russia. In the aftermath of the Romanovs' execution, the Russian monarchy was officially abolished, paving the way for the establishment of the Soviet Union and the advent of a new chapter in Russian history. Conclusion. The fall of the Russian monarchy was a culmination of centuries-old grievances, political upheavals, and historical forces beyond the control of any single individual or dynasty. The controversies surrounding Tsar Nicholas II, the February Revolution, and the tragic fate of the Romanov family serve as poignant reminders of the fragility of power and the enduring quest for justice and freedom. Thank you so much for watching the first video in our series on dissolved monarchies. If you like this video and want to see the rest of our videos in this series, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out.